what you're about to experience is a classic Kaya and Alejandro mess around. Why when it was used to be known as Kayajandro. Classic Kayajandro
Thank
mess
you, Kyle
around.
Brosi.
From Washington State.
Is he from Washington?
Yeah, he is. Uh-huh.
No way!
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
we should meet with him. Anyways.
He's a real estate
let's
agent.
focus.
Didn't
Let's
sell your
focus.
house.
So yeah, part of our story, we did YWAM. That's where we met in 2011. And we did our Disciples Training School in 2011. We got married 2013. So we have been together since 2011. That's 15 years, 13 years of those. We're married, have 3 kids, our greatest gifts.
Yeah, wonderful.
They keep us busy. They are beautiful. What we're here today to talk, it's about one of the most important relationships in our lifetime. Not the only one. We all understand and we acknowledge that not everybody's married. We believe that the principles that we are going to learn today can apply to all relationships.
And more than that, marriage is a relationship that God uses to illustrate his relationship with the church. And so to understand marriage is to understand your relationship with God as an individual. You can take any of these principles, no matter what season of life you're in, and apply them to your relationship with God.
That's true. That's true. That's a good point.
Thank you.
Perspectives today are coming from 2 different lenses. The first one is for the last year, we have been in this deep journey of learning more about the scripture and what the Bible has to say about everything. We have been really blessed by different resources that I just want to share with everybody. Whoever I meet, I want to tell about these resources that have a great impact in my life. One of them is the Bema podcast that we listen a lot, and it gives you a different perspective about the Eastern perspective of the Hebrew Bible. The other one is the Bible Project, but not only the videos, it's the classes.
Mm-hmm.
You are taking classes like you are going to seminary, and all of those are for free, but it is quality material, highly recommended.
Excellent. If you think you know the Bible, but you haven't watched these videos, you're in for a treat because they're going to, even if you've been to seminary, I recommend that you look at these videos.
Yeah. So a lot of the ideas that I am going to present today are not my own. It's something that I have been learning, and I give credit where credit is due. And it's a lot of about these ideas are coming from the Beba podcast and the Bible Project. And we're just basically, when you're talking about marriage in church, you are thinking about Ephesians or Corinthians or what Paul has to say. I want to go back all the way to Genesis. And within the first 3 chapters of the Bible is telling us the foundation. What are those specific important factors that makes a relationship, in this case marriage, effective and successful? And the other lens is my wife, as many of you know. I'm very proud to tell you she's a professional. She's a marriage and family counselor, and that's what she does for a living.
I specialize in marriage.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's what I do.
We're trying to combine these 2 lenses, what the Bible has to say and what the professionals are saying in the field. Oh, funny story. When we got married, well, it's going to be sad and funny. When we got married in 2011, we were living in Mexico City as part of YWAM.
Our first apartment 101, which if you do college courses, 101 means level 1, beginners. So it was our beginner marriage apartment. Such a funny story that noticing details matters for lots of.
And within this first apartment, there is a lot of first things when you get married. And we, for the first time, we were trying to become pregnant, and we find out that we were having difficulties. And there was the one time that we actually were able to conceive, and within 5-6 weeks, I don't remember exactly the details, but we lost that baby Galia. Is that what baby Galia was?
Yeah, her name was Galia. And as miscarriages go, this one, even though it was early, was pretty traumatic for several days.
Yes. I am never going to forget the day that we were traveling back from the hospital after they didn't let me go with her because in Mexico City, hospitals are weird, and they kind of communicated with her English, Spanish barrier. I was in a lot of stress, so her Spanish was not working, and she was by herself. And then eventually she came out, and we just would go into the taxi. We pretty much didn't say anything. As soon as we got into the apartment, I will never forget the time that she just lay down in the bed and started sobbing. And I couldn't do anything else just to be with her and just grief. And that was one of the saddest parts of our marriage.
So I think every marriage at the beginning has some sort of crucible moment where you face a challenge as a couple together for the first time, something that your parents can't help you with, something that your community can't help you with, that this really becomes something that you face just the two of you for the first time. And you have to start building your rituals of communication, connection, your maps for conflict resolution. So we were in our first big crucible and we started building our maps for how are we going to recover from this? What does this look like for our marriage?
And then from the very beginning, as a husband, it's something innate on you that is your responsibility to kind of like fix your wife or like help her be happy again. So from the moment on, I was like thinking, how can I make Kaya happy? How can I make her sorrow, her pain less? So there was a neighbor in the building who found this dog, and through conversations, something came to my mind. I was like, if we adopt this dog, it's going to make Kaya happy right now that she needed the most. So what did we do? We get the dog. Well, we talk about it.
We did talk about it.
And we were like, hey, we can take care of this dog. I think we're ready.
We were just about to become parents. We figured we could probably take care of a cute little dog. Seemed fine.
Yeah. It was a lot of work.
Alejandro thought that I really wanted this dog. He thought that it was going to make me feel so much better after the loss that we had just experienced. What he didn't know is that I was also just trying to make him feel better. And he thought, oh my goodness, he's just suffered such a great loss. I bet getting a dog would make him feel better. So when he asked me, do you want to get a dog? I said, of course, because, didn't say this part out loud, because I want you to be happy.
Yeah. And sometimes we think that we need something to make us happy. And then once we're starting to actually do life with a dog, we realize how difficult it is and how unprepared we were at that time. We were in Mexico City in an apartment, I remind you, and you need to do a lot of things with an animal, a living thing. And we were just not ready. We were in the beginning of our marriage, and there's a lot of things that we didn't know. So it was very difficult. And after a few weeks, we finally sat down and we were like, this is really hard. And we have this honest conversation where I got to the point where I told Kaya, I just got the dog because of you.
I was shocked and said, I never wanted a dog. I got a dog for you.
I was like, I didn't want a dog. I didn't grow up with a dog.
I didn't grow up with a dog either. I don't know why we thought this dog was the solution to our problems, but we were convinced.
There was the solution, and it wasn't.
It was not. But the most important part that we learned was that we had made a big, well-intended assumption on what would solve our conflict, and we were 100% wrong on both accounts.
So today, what we want to emphasize is to the importance of a couple aspects that I believe are extremely important as a foundation for a relationship, but specifically for marriage, which is communication, and trust and vulnerability. And we're going to go ahead and read just a few passages of the scripture in chapter 2 and 3 of Genesis. I like to do a flow reading when if I don't say the word, who says the word?
We say the word.
Yes, this is where we're going to read. For this reason,
a man
will leave his father and his mother, and he will cling to his
woman,
and they will become one
flesh.
And the two of them were
naked.
And the woman and the human and his woman, and they were not
ashamed.
Vulnerability and trust with God at the center. This is the ideal picture of a marriage. I think that we all have read the story from the beginning when we're in children's ministry but if you think about it, this was the beginning of the story before any other character comes. It's just God in communion, in connection with women and men. And it says that it is so beautiful and it's such a beautiful connection that it's paradise. It's the Garden of Eden, which as we have been learning, it's just this idea of a place where you can have a communion so pure and innocent that you can be naked. And what is that naked represents? Vulnerability. One of the main factors on a relationship, in any relationship, but in this case, in the covenant of husband and wife, is vulnerability. Without vulnerability, we cannot trust each other. So without it, we cannot trust her. I cannot trust you. You cannot trust me. But we understand how hard it is because we all have come to We have all come through trauma experiences that tells us do not trust. It says that they were not afraid. The first few years that we were married, and by this time we have moved to the U.S. with our family. We were living already in our first house that we bought, and we were just doing finances. And then I remember I saw Kaya's bank account from when she was a teenager, when she came to Mexico, because I remember her car, and I'm like, hey, do you still have that bank account? Because it was connected to her mom. And I was like, why are you still connected to your mom's account?
For anything. We had a separate account that we used for all of our family finances.
But you still have it.
I still had it.
And then I just honestly asked her the question, why do you still have your account?
My response was, it was a backup plan. Because if he ever left me, I needed a way to get money that he couldn't touch. And it was connected to my mom's account, so she would be able to get me money through that account. And then if I ever didn't feel safe, I should potentially funnel money into that account so that I could have savings. It was a safety net in case he ever left me.
I was like, wait, what? You have that in the back of your mind that I'm going to fail?
I married 5 years at that point.
So in my mind, I was shocked. I was shocked to the idea that she will need to have that plan B. I just felt like it was like this little tiny seed of not trust.
It was a root, because I had not only had the feeling, but I had taken deliberate action.
Yeah.
In my life.
And guess what? I think when you are in the world and when you are honestly sitting with people, that's the wisest thing to do. Like, with the eyes of men, that's what you should do. You should be wise with your money. You should have a plan B. You should be smart, because not everybody. I have this friend, and she has been married for two times, and she was like, yeah, my son is about to get married. I told him from the beginning, you do not get married combining everything. You do it. Your things are your own. Her things are her own. And that's the wisest thing. Her ideas are like what we will think it's wise, because she's afraid that something's wrong is going to happen.
Our money is a tangible way that we can assess how safe we feel, how comfortable we are with people seeing or having access to our money. In terms of marriage, whenever I do premarital counseling and we talk about money management, I don't lean into a preference on how you organize your money. What I want you to understand is why you're organizing it the way that you are. It does not matter how you organize your money. What matters is that you understand the intention behind it. And the intention behind me having a second account was a safety net. It was a lack of trust in the relationship.
Exactly. And that's, I think, for us specifically, it needed to be like that last point of like, hey, I'm going to cancel my Chase account so that I can show you that I completely trust you. And I think after that, our marriage completely shift. I think our fights stop. I think we were fighting a lot.
I wish it was that simple. Year 5 was complicated, but that was one of the many things that happened in year 5 that it did help, that improved our relationship and really solidified a foundation.
It just goes back to the scripture. They were naked. They were not ashamed. The key to be able to be vulnerable and to trust each other is to remember who's at the center.
Right.
Who's at the center of this relationship? And it has to be God. If God is not at the center of our relationship, I cannot trust her, because we are human. We're going to fail. And the same is for me. If she knows that God is not the center of my life and he's not the center of our relationship, she cannot trust me. That's why in the world, it will be so difficult to really trust each other, because they are going to fail. But with God, it's different. From the beginning, I remember when I was choosing our wedding ring, I knew that it needed to be 3 stones, me, Kaya, and God, always. And that's why I chose the ring that I chose, because it was a reminder that he needed to be always in there, just like in Genesis 2. The 2 of them, they were naked, they were in the garden, and God was hanging out with us. That's the picture of the ideal marriage. Trust, vulnerability that lead to trust. Fortunately, this is the sad part, it only lasted like a second. Genesis 2:16, which is when it says that Yahweh Elohim commanded the human, and in this case, human is the Hebrew word for Adam, from every tree of the garden you will surely eat. Let's just if we can just rest for that. From every tree of the garden. If you know the story, there are 2 specific trees that they were mentioned. One of them is the tree of wisdom and knowledge, and the tree of eternal life. So God is saying you can have from every tree, including the eternal life. But guess what? From the tree of the knowledge of good and bad, you will not eat from it. We could eat. We had access to the tree of eternal life. And there are so many references about Jesus and what he represents. But from the beginning, his idea was for us to have eternal life. However, we know what happened. It says, because for the day that you eat from it, you will surely die. Or another version, it says, you will be doomed to die because they didn't die right away. Now, here is where Genesis 3 comes, the fourth character, and is the serpent. It's a character that is like the representation of chaos. It says that it was one of the beasts, but it says here the snake was more shrewd or crafty than any beast of the field, which Yahweh Elohim had made. Let's ponder on that. And he said to the woman, indeed, has Elohim said? Did God really say? How many times we hear that? Did God really say that? You should not eat from any tree from the garden. Do you see how he's talking the truth, but he kind of switched the words? God said, you can eat from all the tree. And the snake is saying, you shall not eat from any tree of the garden, in a question mark, and using kind of like the negative wording of the phrase, kind of just messing up with your mind, right? And the woman, now we can see here, the woman said to the snake, from the fruit of the trees of the garden we may eat, which this is what he said. But from the fruit of the tree, which is in the middle of the garden, how does she know it was in the middle? I think it's implied, or if you read the whole passage, you can kind of deduce that it's in the middle. But from the fruit of the tree, which is in the middle of the garden, Elohim has said, you shall not eat from it or touch it, or you will die. If we compare what God said to Adam to what Eve is telling the snake, did we see the word touch it? That's something that it's ambiguous. If God said that, it's like, where did they come up with the idea of like not even touching it?
I feel like this is something I would say to my kids. Something like, there's a cake on this table. You can eat all the other food on the table, but you can't eat this birthday cake until later. And then I leave the room, and when I come back, they're like screaming at each other for even getting close to the table, for even looking at the food. I didn't say anything about the other food. What are you talking about? I never said that. I know you're all in a fight. I said you can have an apple. I said you can have some chips. I just said wait for the cake, and now they're all up in arms over something that I never said because they added to. They questioned each other.
They questioned, added, and then the snake said to the woman, you surely will not die. Which technically
true.
Because they did not die right away, but now they are doomed to die.
So this makes us question what is death.
Another thing to ponder. So then we know that they see it, they see it's good, they take it, they eat and all of that. But then in number 7, it says, and the eyes of both of them were opened and they knew that they were naked. And this word naked, it's a Hebrew word that there are so many words that rhyme. And the Hebrew word for naked is arum. And the Hebrew word for crafty or smart is aram. So when you are looking at the words in Hebrew, the symbols are very similar. And when they are talking and when they are teaching in Hebrew, they rhyme. It's like this beautiful poetic sound. Aram, arum. And
so the craftiness
of the snake is connected with their nakedness. And they two leaves of fig tree together and made themselves coverings. Now, what we can see is that they are ashamed, which they were not before. And the next thing that I want you guys to see is when God is coming, there is so much more. But one of the things that I want to point out is that the human said, I heard the sound of you in the garden and I was afraid. This is the first time in the Bible that we fear coming. This is the first time that they were afraid. So can you see that relationship? And when you think about conflicts, there is always about either you are ashamed or you are afraid, and that's why you react to whatever situation.
And let's notice what caused that fear and that shame to come into their relationship. It was an adding to God's voice. It's not actually the absence of God's voice at all.
No.
Which is very important. The chaos character, the beast character comes in and questions God. The human's not questioning. Something else external is coming in and questioning God. And then to defend themselves from this external questioner, the human adds to what God has said. And in that process, they are exposed to nakedness, fear, and shame.
Yeah. And that's what I saw in these lines is that communication. Why? Because as you saw, the command was not given to Eve directly. She was not even born yet. She was not even created yet. This conversation was between Adam and God, which means that there has to be this relationship, because who told first this command? Adam to Eve. But my belief is that there was room for interpretation. It was not clear. It was miscommunication between Adam and Eve, because it happens to us every day in our relationships. It's just, this is what I told Kaya. I just can't figure out that maybe Adam came one day after a lot of work naming animals, and yeah, honey, I named the giraffe, and I named the gorilla. Oh, by the way, honey, God said to not eat the tree. You have those conversations where it wasn't in my mind, there was not this constant communication, over communication to make sure and make clear the points that God is saying. And that is what I feel like it needs to be today communicated to you guys, that the communication between your wife and a husband, it's so important to not leave room for misinterpretation, miscommunication, because the snake, the serpent, the chaos is always trying to bring division, doubt, fear, and shame.
Let's talk about exactly what that looks like during conflict. When you're in the middle of a conflict with a spouse, you're going to hear things in your mind like, they're doing this on purpose to hurt me. They don't actually care about me. I'm the only one trying to save this marriage. If they really loved me, they wouldn't act this way. Maybe they're going to say, this conflict proves that I picked the wrong person to marry. That's a big one that comes up, like maybe we're not compatible, and that you should just give up, because this marriage is a lot of work and I'm being really hurt. I want to put a disclaimer here that every single marriage is going to hear these things. The really healthy ones and the really toxic ones. The ones that are truly traumatic are also going to hear these things. So it's very important that if this is a very, very strong narrative in your mind about your marriage, that you do seek professional counsel and or spiritual counsel, because what happens is this whole conversation is about distortion. It's about the fact that the enemy comes in to distort, to twist what God has said. And so everything that we're going to be talking about in what do we do is we have to get back to, what did God say? And what is he saying now? What he said then and what he's saying now are going to have a thread of truth, but the action steps might look different. So the reason I say that is because if you are in an abusive relationship, and I define an abusive relationship as being one where you have done everything in your power to resolve this conflict, but your partner is unrepentant and intentionally harming you, these strategies are not going to work. They're going to cause more harm to you. It does require a different kind of communication. And so that's something that should be addressed with counsel. It's not something you should try and figure out on your own because of the distortion. I want to leave that disclaimer there. With that said, everything that I'm going to say is assuming that you have two people willfully in a marriage where their intent is to move towards each other in love. Even if that's not what's actually happening, even if that's not how it feels, that is their intention, and that they are willing to change to make that happen. Those are very important ingredients. So these are all the voices, the sounds that you're going to hear. These thoughts in the middle of an argument with someone that you love and they love you, they feel so true in the moment. Your heart is going to be racing. You're going to feel emotionally hurt. You're angry. And that voice seems like it's just telling you everything. It's that serpent. It sounds like it's speaking a lot of wisdom. It's asking you questions. Do they care about you? And then it's potentially providing evidence that they don't. And so that is something to remember, that voice in your mind is shrewd. The enemy doesn't have a lot of tricks in his tool case. He's doing the same thing over and over again. And that is the encouraging part, is that if we pay attention to incessant questions, you're going to notice a pattern. And you're going to notice that there's a particular repetition to what the enemy is saying to you about your marriage or about your spouse. So you're not going to have to find a new truth every single time. You're going to have to find the truth and then notice the distortion and remove it on a regular basis. For example, my spouse forgot our date night. The serpent is going to twist that potentially to say something like, they don't care about you, you're not a priority, and they're probably checking out of this marriage. We think these things that tell us illusions about what relationships are going to be like and what the actions of our partner actually mean. So, expectations. If you forgot date night, it means you don't care. Can I just say, as the one who will forget date night, that may not be the story. So another example is we keep having the same argument. Okay, this is a really, really common one. The serpent's going to say, this means you're incompatible. Happy couples don't fight like this. You're failing.
No. Conflict is part of a healthy marriage as well.
Conflict is all over the Bible. So we should expect that it's all over our relationships.
Healthy conflict.
There's toxic conflict all over the Bible.
Or conflict could be.
But there is healthy conflict modeled by God in relationship with his people. That's where God is also going through this process with us to remove distortion. When we get into relationship with any human, we're going to question God's original design and we're going to add to it to make it better, our interpretation. But God's story in scripture is the original paradise. And we, a lot of times, as much as we like to think that we like that story, we don't. We have big problems with God's idea of healthy conflict because it leaves room for an incredible amount of vulnerability between people. Can you imagine Adam and Eve completely naked in a garden? Practically. We have some vulnerability issues. He didn't give them clothes. Maybe some of us think clothes is an upgrade. Maybe a good idea. Maybe we should have clothes. I know that's like a silly thing to think about, but in reality, that's what we do in our marriages. That's what we do in every relationship. God, I don't think we should do it this way. Let me give you some pointers. When you start allowing chaos to cause you to question God's design, here's what happens is you stop being curious and you stop listening. You know that you're right and they're wrong. This is a big thing. You know that you are right and you are wrong. What tree did they eat from?
The tree of the knowledge of the good and bad.
The tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Good and evil, yeah.
When we put ourselves in the position of knowing what our partner thinks and feels without asking them, we are taking on the position of God in their lives. A position that we don't have, nor can we steward well. And we're also having unrealistic expectations of ourselves. From this place, you're going to learn to attack harder, to shut down completely. You're going to bring up every single past hurt, and you say things to wound, not to connect. We all know what that's like. We've done, every single one of us has done this in relationship where a lot of times the way we phrase this is we assume. We assume we know what the other person's thinking, but we don't.
Communication.
And guess what? You are not the specialist at this in your marriage. Your spouse is doing the same thing. And that's further on in the Genesis story that blame is placed on both parties. Nobody takes responsibility for their part, but we didn't have enough time to get into all of that. Now you're not two people trying to understand each other. You're two people at war with each other. Isn't that perfect? All for the enemy. I mean, for chaos. He has turned your marriage into chaos. Marriage is supposed to be a symbol of two people unified so closely that they're considered one flesh. But now it has turned into a war between two.
Why would you want to be in that?
You wouldn't. And that's what happens in Genesis 3. Okay. So here's what I need you to hear. Conflict is not a sign of failure. Conflict is a sign that there's a distortion that's ready to be removed. Let me say that again. In another way, conflict is not an invitation to defend yourself. It's an invitation to lean in to vulnerability.
Wow, the opposite.
The opposite.
Whoa. The upside down kingdom. Because your flesh doesn't want you. That's like the least thing that you want to do.
It's the worst. However, research shows that happy couples don't fight less. So good news, we can keep fighting. But they do fight better. 69% of problems in a relationship are perpetual. That means you'll never solve them. I will always think the keys go in one place in the house, and he will always think they go in a different spot.
The dishes fight.
It's not going to end. So the goal here is not to eliminate conflict. If the goal was to eliminate conflict, we would see scripture reflect that through the elimination of conflict in the narrative. But the culmination of the scriptural narrative is Jesus. And Jesus is conflict. He is a disruptor. Because what is conflict? It is not an indication of a problem. It's an indication that there's a distortion that's ready to be removed. Here's the secret that most couples miss is that the fight is never really about what you think it's about. At the surface level, we like to fight about the content. And in therapy, if you go into therapy and you feel like your therapist is never actually talking about the problem, they're doing that for a reason. Because you come in there just fighting about the dishes, or you're always on your phone, or you don't make time for me. So you want to go into therapy, or you want to go into a conflict with your spouse and be like, get them off their phone, get them doing the dishes on time, and get them taking me on dates, put the reminder in their phone. That's the solution. But we misunderstand the conflict, because what's really happening underneath is when the dishes pile up, you feel invisible and like your effort doesn't matter. That is the distortion that we need to look at. When you're on your phone during dinner, you may feel rejected by your spouse, or like they're not interested in you, or that you're not important. If they just get off your phone and then stare at the plate of food because they haven't understood the true distortion, you're not going to solve the problem. You're just going to change your behavior. When we don't spend time together, I'm terrified we're drifting apart and I'm going to lose you. If we go into this trying to say, like, you need to spend an hour with me today, but they're emotionally disconnected from you because they don't feel known and they're not being vulnerable, you're not going to feel close even though you're spending time together. So we need to understand, what did the enemy say? Or what did God say? And what did we add to it? What did we question? What did we add to it and what did we question? Do we see the difference? One is about dishes. One is about something mattering. One is about a phone. The other is about a belonging. One is about schedules. And the other one is about the fear of abandonment. Wow. This is what chaos doesn't want you to discover, because when you discover what's really happening in your spouse's heart, everything changes. When we bring God, when we bring his supernatural discernment back into our marriage, when we ground ourselves on the truth of what marriage is supposed to be, and we lean into vulnerability, we allow ourselves to move from you're wrong to you're hurting, from you don't care to you need something I haven't understood yet, or we're failing to we are learning.
This is why we're here today. That's why she's here.
This is what God's voice in conflict sounds like. We are both hurting right now. If you can sit with that alone, you are not alone. You will save so much time in your marriage. So much work in the therapy space is on you are both in pain. It's not hundreds of dollars. You're not at war with each other. You're both in pain. And the other thing we spend time on is there's something deeper going on here. We are on the same team. It's just that we've allowed chaos between us. And that's an external thing that we can move. And what am I missing? What am I missing? What am I missing? What am I not understanding about you? Because I'm going to stand on the truth about who God says you are and what marriage is. If what I'm thinking and feeling doesn't align with that, then I'm missing something.
Recognizing the voice of the enemy. Recognizing who I am.
I'm missing something about you. I'm not understanding something about you.
You're missing out in the wholeness of who I am within our marriage.
I am missing something that's happening inside of you. If I'm assuming I know why you forgot the date, but that information doesn't line up with who I know God to be, who he's created you to be, and what marriage is. If I'm thinking, oh, he doesn't care, he forgot the date, that doesn't line up. So I'm missing information about why you forgot the date, as opposed to assuming that you're a terrible person.
Background.
Context, yeah. So how do we break out of the cycle? Okay, so you recognize the snake's voice. You understand conflict is about discovery, but how do you actually break out of the destructive pattern? Practical tools. First one, it is okay to take a break. There's a difference between walking away in abandonment and walking away to regulate and steward connection. There is always two people in a couple, one that wants to engage in the conflict until it's over and one that wants a break and never wants to deal with the conflict again. You have to find the happy medium. It takes 20 minutes for your brain to regulate. So what you're going to do is you're going to get heated. You're going to realize we're not making progress anymore. And one of you is going to say, I'm taking a 20-minute break. And then we're going to circle back. It's important that you say when you're coming back. And it's important that you do.
Yeah.
And then when you do, what you're going to do is get underneath the conflict.
Yeah, because if you just leave without telling your spouse, I'll be back in 20 minutes, that's just going to make her more mad. Like that's I have done it
This
before.
Is personal.
I have done it before, but it did work for me because I went and I took some time and I walked in the trail and I have this contact with nature and I was like, okay, I think we can solve it, but I didn't tell her where I was going and I slammed the door and it's like, you need to communicate that. Because otherwise it's just working for me, but she's still in the conflict or she's still in the heated.
That's true, but that's kind of level 2.0 because once he walks out the door, I have a choice. I can choose to listen to the narrative of, to be fair, to be clear, this was like one time this happened. It's not a pattern. But I can choose to believe that he's walking out on me and leaving the marriage and I should have kept my bank account.
Well, remember that time I took Amia to the hotel because we were like...
Yeah, that was in year 5. That was a bad one. The first time he did it, it was terrifying. Or I can choose to believe that he needs a break. He needs a couple of minutes to ground himself and that he's not leaving me. He's grounding himself. He's connecting with God. He's removing chaos from himself and putting God back in the center so that he can come back into communication. But we kind of jumped ahead there. But that's like level 2. But level 1, you want to pre-communicate. You want to be clear on what you're doing and why and when you're coming back. And then when you come back, you want to ask these questions. What does this mean to you? You do not need more information about yourself at this time. You've had 20 minutes to figure that out. You need data from your partner. You cannot solve this problem without data from your partner. So what does this mean to you? When I do or say X, what do you feel? This is really important as Americans that we ask this question because a lot of times we think feelings don't matter and that their data is irrelevant. But how we feel is just as important as if not more important and valuable data to what the real problem is than what we are doing. How I feel when the dishes are or are not loaded is going to give me more clarity on what's actually going on than what I think. Because oftentimes what clients will say is like, I don't think that loading the dishes should be a big deal, but I feel like it is.
It goes with my whole thing about intention versus impact, because you can do things that you are non-intentionally doing, but you are creating this impact in your spouse.
Yes. So discover intention versus impact, which is a whole other thing. What are you afraid of right now? Go with it, guys. You're going to push these questions away and be like, I'm not afraid of anything. But you wouldn't be reacting with your amygdala if you weren't afraid of something.
Which is afraid, what we see in
Fear
coming into the
Fear
story.
is,
I was afraid.
Yeah.
I heard you were coming. I was afraid.
we saw that in Genesis.
Yeah.
Fear. Okay. Help me understand what this is really about for you. And I want you to notice how much curiosity and patience this question takes. It's hard to slow down and ask the question, but it's even harder to answer it because you have to slow down and be vulnerably self-aware. You have to be vulnerable to ask and you have to be vulnerable to answer. So everyone should take turns. When you said X, the story I told myself was Y. Is that what you meant? You can be proactive. I think what I'm really feeling is scared, hurt, rejected. What I really need from you is, these are all stems, sentence stems that you can finish to help you communicate with your spouse. So for example, on the surface, the chaos voice is going to say, you're always late. You're so selfish. But if you take the time to slow down and ask these questions, what you're going to be able to say is, when you're late, the story I tell myself is that I'm not a priority to you. And that really scares me because I need to know that I matter to you. In the first version, your spouse gets defensive, they attack back or shut down. But in the second version, your spouse's heart softens because they now understand this isn't about 10 minutes late. This is about my spouse needing to feel valued. We have to humble ourselves as a spouse hearing that and be okay with realizing we're doing something that wasn't intended to harm, but it did have that impact.
It impacted.
If you only remember one thing, and this is why I'm saying this tool last, because all the other ones, you can Google them, you can find those resources, Gottman resources, marriage books all over the place. But if I was to give you just one tool that summarizes everything, it is assume you do not have all the information. This is the most powerful tool. The snake says that you know. That is the tree, the knowledge of good and evil. If you assume that you alone know the fullness of good and evil for your marriage alone, that is a distorted view of marriage because it is a unified partnership that requires the perspective of two people bound together by God. That's actually three sources of information. So to assume that you and God know what's best for your marriage without your spouse, or to assume that you without God know what's best for your marriage, you are missing 1 to 2/3 of the information that's going to get you to the ideal marriage connection.
Wow.
So practice this phrase. I know I'm missing something. Everybody say it with me.
I know I'm missing something.
Help me see what you see. This communicates that I believe you have good intentions. I trust you're not trying to hurt me, that we're on the same team. I'm humble enough to admit when I might be wrong. And you know what? It's not even humble enough to admit that you might be wrong. Humble enough to admit that you don't know everything. None of us knows everything. It's impossible. Let it go, guys. You're a smart chicken, but you're just not that smart. Okay? You're just not.
I mean, this reminds me, like, we can have this conversation with, I am like, we are in the same team. Assume that, in this case, assume in a positive way that everything that I do is for the sake of the marriage, for the sake of the kids. Any point my intention is to harm or to do it for causing you pain. Everything I do is for good.
The intention is good.
The intention is good. the impact of my
The impact is what we have to unpack, which is what we
might
all
not
have
always
to do.
be, yeah.
We always have to do that. When you approach conflict with curiosity instead of certainty, it breaks the cycle. That's a psychological way of saying when you approach conflict with curiosity instead of certainty, you are leaning into the Garden of Eden. You're returning to God's ideal for marriage. Our hope and our dream is that the church becomes a lighthouse for healthy marriages.
Yeah.
That people are drawn to church by the joy and the life that they see in our marriages. And I hope that we make it clear today that 1, that is God's heart and that it's possible. 2, that conflict is not an indicator that can't happen. It's an indicator that it is happening, and how we choose to engage with it is the difference.